Okay, so this is part 2 of the Keurig versus regular coffee maker, or is a Keurig coffee maker right for you? And we're talking about energy consumption. So, right off the bat, this coffee maker is not turned on and it's using 3.7 to 3.8 watts. It sometimes jumps up to 4. You could consider this a pretty bad energy vampire. That's about as much electricity as a nightlight. So if you have this thing plugged in, it's about as much energy as having a nightlight plugged in all day. Now, another interesting thing about the Keurig is that it consumes quite a lot of power when it's heating the tank. Let's turn it on and see what it jumps to. Already it's climbing. Alright, we're at 1421 watts. And this is just to heat the inner tank. Now, one thing that is valid to point out about the Keurig's energy consumption is that just heating the tank is the biggest amount of energy it uses. Once the tank has warmed up, and you'll see it fall, its energy usage is actually fairly modest. You can see it's, now that the blue lights are on indicating it's ready, it's actually down to 4.5. But one thing that it does is it jumps around a lot. If you watch, it might go up to 400 watts for a few seconds. Of course, now it's not doing it. But anyway, the reason why it has to do this is because it needs to keep its inner tank at the correct temperature before you brew a cup of coffee. Now, if I actually do brew a cup of coffee, you can see its energy consumption heats up again. So you can see that the energy consumption of the machine is all over the place, depending on what state it's in and what it's doing. And like I said, you'll see it fall back to its standby energy consumption. But every time the temperature of the water in the inner tank falls down, it'll spike up quite a bit. I'm going to leave the camera running, see if we can actually witness that. And then we will move on to the standard coffee maker, see how much energy it uses. There you go, you see it peaking up about 477 degrees. Pardon that doorbell sound, that's my phone. It's a timer, I gotta shut off the water outside. But anyway, so that's how the energy consumption compares with that's how the energy consumption is at the Keurig brewer, and momentarily I will get the standard coffee maker up here. Okay, so now here's the standard drip coffee maker. It's plugged into the kilowatt and turned off, and as you can see in the video, although it's a little harder to see in this one, it's at 0.0 watts. So this is not an energy vampire. When it's turned off, it is truly off. So I have just about probably enough to make 2 cups of coffee of water in there, just so we can compare how much energy it uses making the coffee and how much energy it uses keeping it warm. So let's turn it on. So it's using 939, or it's actually falling a little bit, so it's using about 930 watts. Oh, there we go. It's a little less stable than I thought it would be. So we'll say about 950 watts of brewing the coffee. And again, as we saw, it takes about 2 minutes and 30 seconds for it to actually brew the coffee. So we're running around this much as it makes the coffee. And what I will do is I'll stop, and then we'll come back to when it's actually heating the coffee. Okay, so the coffee maker just finished making coffee and it fell down to 0 watts. Now this is something that is going to be hard to compare between the two coffee makers, and that is these drip coffee makers are designed such that there's a thermostat which controls the heating element and basically has it on for short periods of time and off for the rest. So right now it's at 0 watts, and you'll probably hear it click, and then it will come back up to probably around 950 watts. And that's just how these things operate. They don't really have something like a dimmer, if you will, that will be able to limit the heating element's consumption to like 300 watts. They'll basically stay off, and then once the thermostat determines that it's too cool, it'll kick back on and the heating element will shoot back up. Now these coffee makers, if you watch the video that I talked about earlier from the engineer guy, link in the description, they have one single heating element. The same heating element both heats the water as it makes the coffee and keeps it warm once it's done. But as we can see here, it's fallen to 0 watts and it's been at it for about a minute now. So this coffee maker is not consuming any power. The only power is from the little neon lamp inside the power switch, which is so negligible in this case that it's 0.0 watts. So you could say that this coffee maker is no longer consuming energy. I actually find it somewhat surprising that it's still at 0 watts. I was expecting it to have come on by now. Alright, it's back on now. So you can see it's 930 watts. Let's see how long it stays on. Okay, not long at all. So you can see that to keep the coffee warm, the element just comes on for a few seconds and then shuts back off. So really, I would say that the energy consumption of a standard drip coffee maker, even if you were to leave it on for an hour, is less than that of the Keurig system. Now, in addition to energy consumption, I'm also going to talk about environmental impact in terms of the K-Cup itself. Because there's one big problem with the K-Cup system, and that is you cannot easily recycle the K-Cups. It's possible, but it's quite a pain, and I'll show you what you have to do now to get through that. So here I have a spent K-Cup. Now, one thing that makes them hard to recycle right off the bat is the fact that once they've been used, they're quite hot. I just made this coffee, and it's still very hot right now. So the way the Keurig system works basically is on the inside of the cup there's a filter that has the coffee in it, and it pierces a hole in the top and a hole in the bottom, and it forces water through it, and then you get coffee. Now when you want to recycle these cups, the procedure is actually quite annoying. You don't need to do anything with tools or use scissors or anything like that, but you basically have to peel away at the hole in the top. You'll see the coffee in there. And this alone is quite frustrating because it's not designed to peel away easily. And the reason why it's not designed to peel away easily is to prevent people from thinking they need to take the top off before they make the coffee. So you can do this by hand. It's not too easy. Here, I've got some good grip now. Alright, so I've got most of the top off. Now you have to get all the coffee out. So easiest way to do that is to just kind of whack it against a paper towel. And then you can maybe, depending on how these are constructed, get the filter out of it. Sometimes that's easier said than done. Yeah, this one is kind of glued in. So at this point you couldn't recycle this because it's got too much junk. So if you rip the paper filter out, like I'm doing now, Still, I don't have all the paper filter out, but you can see I am now messy. There's coffee everywhere. And this still probably isn't nice enough to recycle. So, the Keurig system pretty much sucks in terms of environmental responsibility, if you want to call it that, because basically you just have to throw these away. And if you want to go through the effort that I just did to recycle them, then you've defeated the point of the system, which is the ultimate inconvenience. So basically, you pretty much would throw these in, make your coffee, and then throw them away. It's really hard to recycle them. And I think that Keurig should do something with their K-Cup design to allow it to be more easily recycled. Unfortunately, they don't. Let me rinse my hands here. Now, when you've got when you're using a regular coffee maker, you can just, pardon me, I kicked the tripod. You can just get rid of your grounds, and you can even use them in compost. The other thing to consider is that the paper filters that you purchase for your coffee maker cost next to nothing. A pack of 200 is less than $2. So they cost less than 1 cent each. And if you make coffee once in the morning, then that's less than 1 cent a day in the cost of the filter. We'll talk about that more in cost. But the point of this is to show that if you are someone who thinks recyclability is important, well, the K-Cup system is not a good idea for you because these K-Cups basically have to be thrown away.